Hello everyone, my name is John, I'm the Geeky Fanboy, and welcome back to what I dubbed is BBC Sherlock month, because July is the anniversary of a BBC Sherlock, which makes the show 11 years old this year, and oh boy do I feel old saying that. So last week we started off with a big ranking of all the 13 episodes within the series. And today I decided to shine a bit more of a light on how BBC Sherlock actually works as a Sherlock Holmes adaptation. Because as much as I love this show, I also know that it is not perfect. I mean, you heard me rant about Series 4 a lot in last week's video. So, yeah, I know this show isn't perfect. It's just a show I'm very fond of. It was one of the big first Sherlock Holmes adaptations I got really into when I was younger, shortly after having read the stories for the first time. So in this video I would like to highlight a few points about how BBC Sherlock gets the original canon right, but how it also gets it wrong, because there are elements in here I really like about the characters and how it adapts some of the stories, but then again, because of weird adaptational choices and Stephen Moffat just not being a very great writer most of the time, there are some things that I can't help but say that was absolute bollocks. So come with me as I highlight, what did I say? 1, 2, 3, 4 things I thought the show gets right about the canon, and 4 things I think the show does not get right about the canon. So let's go. The first right thing I would like to talk about is the whole modernization point, this whole modern touch the show has. Because if you read the original stories, Sherlock Holmes is a very up-to-date man, I think, even for Victorian times. Like, he is even in real life cited as an example for how people came to understand modern policing and modern detective work. Like, how we see Sherlock deducing things in the stories was applied in real life back in the past. And we see Sherlock, including a lot of what was at the time temporary technology or policing or detective work that hadn't even been thought of at the time. And I think this is wonderfully translated into BBC Sherlock, where we see Sherlock using a lot of his mobile phone, internet technology, GPS and all. I think that is a wonderful idea to include all of this, especially also that they focus on Sherlock being a chemist. And it is in the original stories hinted at that he might have studied chemistry or something similar to that at university at some point. It's never clearly stated what he studied, but it is clear that he studied something along those lines. And I think it's great that they focus on that. This sort of, I'm not sure if I want to call it CSI vibe, but I guess you know what I'm driving at. It really dives into, using modern technology and using this modern sense of analyzing things. And I like how this technology is included also for the style of the show, that we see Sherlock texting, that we actually do see the text on screen. I think that was pretty cool, especially at the time, back when the first series aired in 2010. That was cool, stylized stuff, I thought. And it also helps us to understand how Sherlock conducts some of his work, that we see in what he actually Googles or what he looks up on his phone, and that it is made visible to us via this modern technology. So I think the BBC series gets this mostly right to when they decided to bring Sherlock Holmes into the 21st century. And I think Sherlock Holmes as a character works brilliantly in an updated version. Because, for one thing, detective stories just work. They will always work. They worked 200 years ago, they work now. And because policing or detective work is constantly updated, you can always find something new. You can connect the old with the new, and especially, like I said, with Sherlock Holmes, you can see where some of the origins of actual detective or modern police work come from, and you can include them now in the 21st century version. So that's one of the things I think the BBC series got right. Now, for the first thing that BBC Sherlock got wrong in regards to canon is Sherlock is a huge twat in this show, especially in the first couple of episodes. Like, don't get me wrong, I absolutely adore Benedict Cumberbatch as Sherlock. It's something I'm going to come back to later. I think he does a marvelous job. He's a fantastic actor. And he manages to make Sherlock very charismatic despite being a huge wanker. And the thing is, and it's just something the makers of the show completely over-exaggerate. Like, in the original stories, Sherlock, yeah, he can be a bit of an he can be inconsiderate, and at times Watson describes him as seeming like sort of being like inhuman, or he's very machine-like, or that he can be cold at times, or very disconnected, especially emotionally, from what's going on around him, especially when he's like really into the investigation. But Sherlock is never as blatantly impolite and just an all-around arsehole as he is throughout you could argue, series 1 and 2 of BBC Sherlock. Because if you watch the first couple of episodes, you know what, you do wonder, why does Watson even like him? Why would anyone like this man? Because he's not only impolite, he like outright insults everyone around him, even Watson at times, and he never really apologizes for it. Because in the canon, like I said, yeah, Sherlock can be like a bit of a recluse, and he is socially awkward at times, but sometimes he's called out by Watson, and then he realizes that he's actually doing something wrong, and sometimes he even apologizes for what he's done. And there are even moments in the canon where he's really showing how warm of character he actually is. Especially when he like solves cases and he's able to understand why certain people do certain things, and he's like, okay, it's a bad thing, but I understand why they did it. The thing about the original Sherlock Holmes character is that he is a static character. He's a borderline flat character, you could even argue, meaning he does not go through any kind of character development. Like, no one in the original canon does, because it's very episodic, and Sherlock going through any kind of huge character changes wouldn't really go with the kind of stories that Arthur Conan Doyle tried to tell. So Sherlock and also Watson have a specific set of characteristics, and that's it, and they never really change throughout the story. The mysteries are story driven, they are never character driven. Our characters in the original canon never change. And in the show, I can see that they sort of try to do that with Sherlock becoming a little more understanding and warmer as the series goes on. The problem is it doesn't really work that much. I think just the way, I don't know, just the way it was written throughout series 3 and 4 especially just didn't really feel right, or it just didn't really work for me, considering that in the canon you already have this quote-unquote perfect character you can just use, and then they go and take like bits and pieces of his character they like and like completely over-exaggerate them, and then turn Sherlock into a huge twat, even though he really isn't in the original canon. Moving on to the second thing the BBC series got right is Watson's characterization. Because I always go on about this, that I appreciated when in Sherlock Holmes adaptations they let Watson be a proper character. Because there's so many adaptations out there where Watson is like a bumbling fool, he's just an idiot, he's there for the comic relief, he doesn't really contribute anything to the mystery, he's just there to make Sherlock look good. And I know to a certain degree that is sort of what Watson's role is in the canon. He is a point of view character. He's there to make Sherlock look special, because Watson is the normal perspective. He's the reader's perspective. He's there to ask questions so Sherlock can explain things to us. But Watson, yes, on occasion, he can be a little bit stupid in the canon. That is true. But Watson is never like a huge fool. He's never the butt of the joke. Like, this man is a doctor. He was at war. He studied medicine. He's not an idiot. And that's what I like about the BBC series. Martin Freeman's Watson is amazing, and Martin Freeman in general in the show is just very good. I love his acting as Watson, and they let him have like actual proper character. Like, you can tell that he is a doctor. He cares about patients and the people in his life. That he is always, on the job. Because there are a couple of adaptations where I'm like, I think they completely forgot that Watson is a doctor and is supposed to care about people, especially when they get hurt. But that he's also a bit more rough and tough, that he was a war medic, and they managed to combine this into a very interesting Watson, I think. And I'm going to come back to this whole character dynamic between Holmes and Watson later, but I like that they also let Watson be his own character independent of Sherlock. Yes, the main relationship, the main friendship of the series is naturally between Holmes and Watson, and a lot of character moments focus on the relationship between the two. But Watson also gets to do his own thing, especially, which is one of the better things, I think, of the series too. Like, once we have introduced Mary, we get to see Watson not just hanging around with Sherlock, we get Watson hanging around with his wife, and then later in series 4 he even becomes a dad. And I think it's great, especially in like series that go on for a longer time. I think it's important to not only focus on Sherlock, but especially also on Watson. Because, yeah, everyone knows Sherlock, everyone loves Sherlock, but it's Holmes and Watson, and we need Watson to be a good and interesting character as well. And Watson can carry a mystery. Like, one of the most popular Sherlock Holmes stories, the Hound of Baskerville, is almost entirely only Watson on the case, because Sherlock is like, I'm not sure if I want to go there. Watson, I let you handle this stuff. And then we just get half, even 3/4 of the story. It's just Watson doing stuff. So let him be a proper character, like in the BBC series. He can be a proper, fun character. He can be tough. He can be emotional. He can have interesting relationships not only with Sherlock, but also with other characters. And I think that's one of the great things that the BBC series got absolutely right. Moving on from a good characterization to a bad characterization. The next thing that BBC Sherlock got completely wrong with regards to the canon, Irene Adler. Now, I've become increasingly more critical of this episode over the years, because when I watched it for the first time, I don't remember when did series 2 come out, 2012 or something. I think, like 15 years old or something. I did not understand what was going on there in regards to like strong female characters and feminism and all that stuff. And sure, I had read some of the stories, and I think I had even read Scandal Bohemia at the time, but I didn't like really get all the nuances yet. So over the years, I've realized, wow, they really did Irene Adler dirty in that episode, didn't they? I went over this during the episode rankings. I'm trying to keep it a bit shorter here. So what they do is they take the most interesting and significant female character of the original canon, the only woman to ever outsmart Holmes, the one woman who was able to change Holmes' mindset about women, and they turned her into a gay but not really gay dominatrix who apparently is able to defeat Sherlock, but not really, because she falls in love with him, and then he completely destroys her life and later has to save her from terrorists. How the F do you manage to screw that up so much? Nothing against Laura Pulver. She does an amazing job, and I absolutely love her as an actress. And she sells the hell out of this as much as she can, given what she got with the script. But why? Like, Irene is such an iconic character. She is in basically every Sherlock Holmes adaptation, and she only appeared in one canonical story. That's how brilliant of a character she was. And you managed to completely ruin it by missing the point of the story. The point of A Scandal in Bohemia is challenging Holmes's sexist mindset and showing people women can be just as smart as men, and that in that story even be smarter than frickin' Sherlock Holmes. Like, Sherlock is not the good guy in that story. He tries to steal something from that woman, and she's like, no, that's my stuff, and how about you leave me alone and I outsmart you? Like, in the original story, Irene did nothing bad. She's not the bad guy. She just got involved with that king, and the relationship didn't work out. She kept the pictures, but she didn't do anything with them. And then Sherlock decided to just steal that woman's property. And she's like, no, I found someone else whom I really love. And she marries for love in the 19th century, in a Victorian story. She marries for love and outsmarts Sherlock Holmes and fucks off to America and is like, bye. And I love that. That is brilliant. And in BBC Sherlock, it's like, nah. I mean, I get it that they maybe didn't want her to marry. I get it, the whole angle of, you know, strong, independent woman and sexual independence. It's an interesting idea, and I think it's a good concept. But Steve Moffat can't write women, for heaven's sake. At least he can't write them well. And then they turn her into the bad guy. Like in Scandal in Belgravia, she does use the picture for blackmail, and she wants to do bad things with them, and it's just like in it for the game, and she's even connected to Moriarty, which is something we're going to come back to. And then she loses, first of all, and then second of all, she loses because she has fallen in love with Sherlock Holmes. Something that would have never ever happened in the original canon story. And then he completely ruins her life, and she's like, what the hell am I supposed to do now? And then in an epilogue, he has to save her from the situation he got her into in the first place, I might add. It's just absolutely ridiculous. And in hindsight, Scandal in Belgravia, not the best of episodes. But moving on to something that the BBC series got right, the Holmes-Watson dynamic. So this is something I said I was going to come back to. This comes down to, first off, I think Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman independently are already great actors. And I love seeing them work, not just in the show, but also in general in other shows and movies. But then they put them together, and it just immediately clicks, I think. As soon as they are on screen together, and you see them together at Baker Street for the first time, and Sherlock slowly roping in Watson on this mystery, it just immediately works, I think. Because, again, this comes down to them getting, for once, Watson's characterization right. And as exaggerated as some of Sherlock's characteristics are, they get his relationship with Watson right for most of the time. And they just immediately bounce off each other. And you can see that Sherlock respects this man. And I love that, because Sherlock sees something in Watson. There's a reason he keeps Watson around. Like, a man as smart as Sherlock must have a good reason why he keeps someone as normal, quote unquote, as Watson around, because he trusts him and he respects him for the man, for the doctor that he is, and he sees value in him and he sees use in him, and he becomes this one man that Sherlock is like, no, I actually openly care about this man, and he's like the one person I need he's like the only person Sherlock really needs in his life for like the emotional connections. And I think they nailed this. They nailed this in this show. Which is, again, also hugely, mostly to the acting that I think is fantastic and works great between the two actors. Like, I know that they casted Benedict Cumberbatch immediately, like he was the only choice they had for Sherlock, and then they took a really long time to find a proper Watson. I think Matt Smith at some point was even considered to be the Watson in this series, which, oh my god, can you imagine? But naturally that didn't work out, because just look at Matt Smith. He looks like babyface Sherlock Holmes. He would... Actually, someone cast Matt Smith as Sherlock Holmes. I would like to see that. Would be kind of interesting. But doesn't matter. Yeah, I think they get the character dynamic absolutely right, especially like the emotional stakes that these two men have for each other. They openly care about each other, that they are emotional for one another, which is one of these character developments that we see throughout the series, especially like in series 3 and 4, when Sherlock learns to be a bit more forthcoming in regards to emotions and stuff, and that they actually allow there to be cracks in the relationship at times. Sure, it does get a bit over-exaggerated, especially in like series 4 with how pissed off Watson gets because Sherlock's apparently responsible for Mary dying, but not really. But this is like the one thing you have to get right when you adapt a Sherlock Holmes story. If your Holmes and your Watson on screen have no chemistry, you can basically throw everything else out the window. Because if you don't get that right, there's no point. This is the main selling point of the whole Sherlock Holmes thing. His relationship with Watson and this cool duo solving mysteries. And I think they get this absolutely right in the BBC show. Moving on to the third bad thing that the series got wrong about the canon, their over-reliance on Moriarty. Again, don't get me wrong. I love Andrew Scott. Andrew Scott is amazing, and it's so much fun to watch him play Moriarty. But after series 2, they just should have been done with Moriarty. I personally think it was already a mistake to introduce him so early in series 1 already. I think they should have done something else maybe for series 1 and then have Moriarty be the big bad for the finale of series 2. And then after they should have been done with him. Because the canon is done with him. After Reichenbach fall, we only get like the empty house after, which is about Moran taking revenge against Sherlock Holmes, and that's it. Moriarty, canonically, it's mentioned or appears in 2 stories. One of them I think he only gets mentioned in, and then there's like the final problem, which is like the huge story where Holmes and Moriarty fight to the death. The thing is, Moriarty is a significant character in the canon. Naturally, he's the character solely created for killing off Sherlock Holmes, because the other Conan Doyle was like, I don't want to write Sherlock Holmes stories anymore, let's create characters just so I can kill them off. That's what happened. But he left a significant impact. I absolutely get that. But there is a certain point where you just have to realize, okay, there's not much more we can do with him. Like, after series 2, they just keep teasing you with, oh, look, Moriarty might not actually be dead, or, ooh, did you miss him? Because, I don't know, there are videos of him. We don't know if they're real or anything. Or, look, it's a flashback with Moriarty. Or, look, oh, it's Moriarty in the final episode of series 4. He maybe works together with the big bad Euros. He could still be alive. No, he's dead. After series 2, after Reichenbach fall, he's dead. He never comes back. And I hate the fact that they keep teasing the audience with him maybe still being alive. In the original stories, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle doesn't really waste a whole lot of time or pages on telling us a whole lot about Moriarty. Like, we know he's a professor, and that he's maybe a bit older than Sherlock and sort of lean looking, and that he's very smart and has a huge criminal network. He has a younger, or at least he has a brother who I think works at a railway station or something like that. And that's pretty much it. Like, his character was literally only invented to kill off Sherlock Holmes. There's not much more to him than that. And again, he's a significant character. But boy, do adaptations in general, but especially BBC Sherlock, needed to stop overblowing Moriarty's presence and just rely on him way too much. Like, everything had to be connected to Moriarty somehow. Like I said, I think it would have worked way better if you had introduced him maybe at the end of series 1, then he becomes the big bad for series 2, but not have him be the big bad of series 1. Like, everything is connected to him. The first guy, Jefferson Hope, they shoot, he's connected to Moriarty. The leader of the Chinese mafia is connected to Moriarty in one way or another. Like, even freaking Irene Adler, which comes back to the whole Irene Adler characterization thing. Like, Irene apparently couldn't do any of the cool stuff she did in the original stories on her own. No, she had help from Moriarty, because apparently he has to be everywhere. And the show just relied on this way too much, because back then, like when this originally aired, I was always hyped about this. I really fell for it. Like after series 2, every time they teased it, I was like, oh my god, they did not do that. Oh my god, Moriarty might still be alive. The thing is, they tricked me. I was like, oh my god, he might still be there. And I get like freaked out when the message played, like, what, did they miss me, blah, 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 blah. And then it turned out to be nothing. Absolutely freaking nothing. And it just relied on this hype of you being like, oh cool, Moriarty, I get to see Andrew Scott again. Oh, I got to watch the next episode. But then nothing. It has actually nothing to do with him. Like the one proper scene we get of Moriarty after series 2 is this whole flashback scene in the very final episode where he meets Euros, and it's a dumb scene, because why the hell would Mycroft allow Moriarty to meet up with Euros? It's dumb. And I'm done ranting about this. As much as I love Andrew Scott as Moriarty, BBC Sherlock over-relied on Moriarty's character way too much. However, this brings me to my last point about how BBC Sherlock gets the canon right, the Holmes-Moriarty dynamic. Because arguably, the Moriarty in BBC Sherlock is really not at all like the Moriarty in the book, or books, however you want to count that. But I just have to be honest about it. It's so much fun to see this Moriarty and this Sherlock together on screen. Benedict Cumberbatch and Andrew Scott just acting at each other, basically. Whenever it's just Holmes and Moriarty in the scene together alone in the show, it's absolutely amazing, because you can just feel the intelligence level brimming and oozing out of the walls when they talk to each other. And how you can tell that they despise each other, but at the same time, they are weirdly kind of into one another, because they intellectually challenge each other on the very, very high level. Because I imagine, and this is also sort of expressed throughout the show, that these two have never met anyone else who's like them, that can challenge them on this level. And I know Moriarty gets a lot of flack for not just killing off Sherlock, because he could just do that. But throughout series 2, especially like in the Reichenbach Fall episode, it's just so much fun to see these two play with each other and see how Moriarty's always able to one-up Sherlock every time. Like this whole scene when Moriarty visits Sherlock after the court case and basically lays out what's gonna happen in the next couple of days and weeks. It just gives me goosebumps every time. It's just so good. And this whole final scene with them on the roof of the hospital is still to this day one of my absolute favorite, if not even my absolute favorite scene in BBC Sherlock. Because it's just great seeing these two characters talk everything out, constantly trying to be like, oh, I figured that out, yeah, but I figured that one out earlier. And yeah, it gets a bit ridiculous. The show is ridiculous. It definitely tries to be way too smart at certain points, way too often. But it's just fun to see these two play it out. And I think this reaches a perfect high point in the Reichenbach Fall episode. And like I said, they should have been done with it after that. Because in series 2, like, Sherlock meets his high point with Moriarty at the end of series 2. Like, this was the big bad guy. And it should have been like the climax. And it would have been perfect if they had stayed with Moriarty staying dead, even killing himself to prove a point, which absolutely shocked me back in the day. But it really kind of worked for me. And you could argue Moriarty even sort of kind of won? Maybe? Like, Moriarty was always one step ahead of Sherlock, and I love that. And I like that you can tell with these two that they can't really be without one another in a weird way, because they intellectually just challenge each other to a point where basically it's mutual assured destruction, which is what we basically see in the Reichenbach Fall episode. And we just kind of ignore everything that happens after series 2 with them being like, Moriarty might be back, blah, 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 blah. We'll just ignore that, because as far as I'm concerned, the Holmes-Moriarty dynamic in BBC Sherlock is fantastic. And lastly, the final thing that BBC Sherlock gets wrong about the canon is that it goes completely off the rails. It completely evades the original premise of the canon as the series goes on. I already mentioned this earlier when I said that the original canon is episodic in nature. There is no real chronology or anything to these stories. You can kind of try and pinpoint when certain stories are set during which year, and sometimes you maybe get mentioned to an earlier case that you could have read about, but that's it. Like I said, you don't get any overarching character developments. You don't get any like with Moriarty in BBC Sherlock, you don't get any overarching mysteries where you have Sherlock solve one case and that leads into another case he solves immediately after that. That just never happens. And BBC Sherlock got that very, very wrong the longer the show went on. So I already mentioned that we got this with Moriarty, him being basically connected to anything that happens in Series 1 and 2, and even afterwards somewhat. Which isn't necessary, because that is not in the canon. And this is why I think the first two series of Sherlock are the best, because they rely more on this episodic nature. Like, you have an independent mystery in each of these episodes, and nothing really carries over from previous episodes apart from the mentions of Moriarty, which then eventually culminates into the series, the episode 3 finale. But for most of the part, you can watch these episodes separately in the first two series, and the characters are relatively the same. You can follow the mystery because it's a different mystery each time. Because like I mentioned earlier, the original stories are not character-driven, not at all. They're purely story-driven mysteries. It's all about Sherlock and John solving an interesting case. And that's why things start becoming worse and more boring once Series 3 starts. Because then the show moves away from focusing on a single cool mystery based on one of the original stories and moves to, let's focus more on the characters, on the personal life, especially with an over-reliance on Sherlock. The show starts revolving too much about the characters themselves, which I can understand is what you want to do, especially if you have a show that goes on for a longer time. Again, I get why you would like to explore characters, and Sherlock Holmes is an interesting character, but again, he is almost a very flat character. He doesn't change much. So everything that you do with him, everything that you add to him is just that. You add to the character. You write about character development that's not in the stories, or you move too far away from what actually happens, and that's a case of Moffat just thinking, I can be so much more engaging and intelligent than the source material. No, Moffat, you're not. Just don't. Just adapt these stories like you said you would, by honouring the canon and not ruining it. God damn it, that man. And I think you can tell that this is what the creators, and especially also Stephen Moffat, worked with from the very beginning, because I found this quote in one of my neat little books I have, where he talked about how he approached making the show, where he said, it's what we always say about Sherlock. It's not a detective series, it's a series about a detective. It's about his life and the things that happen to him, his relationships with people. So we can't just do the story of the week on Sherlock. We have to explore what this meant to Sherlock, what it meant to John. How has this changed everything for them? I mean, nice thinking, but it doesn't work for the material tried to adapt, because that's not what the stories are about. That's not what Sir Arthur Conan Doyle tried to do when he wrote these stories. He was not like, I'm gonna tell stories about the life of Sherlock Holmes and John Watson. and how they happen to solve cases, but it's mostly about their personal lives. Not really. He wrote stories about an eccentric man and his best friend who get involved in cool mysteries. That's what they do. They literally have a case of the week thing. That's why there are short story collections. That's literally what the canon is. Which is why I think it works best if you adapt Sherlock Holmes. If you want to do a TV show, you do it with like a sort of mystery of the week thingy. Because that is what these short story collections are, and they are perfect for adaptation. They're just there. You can just use one of these stories and be like, okay, that's one episode of our series. And you just go with it. I guarantee you, at least I personally, Sherlock Holmes fans do not expect huge character developments from an adaptation. I expect an interesting take on the character, yes, or a take that is very close to the books. I expect there to be good acting. I expect the character to be interesting. I expect the character to be like what I imagined him to be like when I read the stories, but I'm not like going into an adaptation being like, oh, I hope Sherlock Holmes really goes through a huge character arc throughout the series. Not really, because that's not what I got from the book, so I don't really expect it too much in an adaptation. And again, I see how you attempted to do that, because this is what TV usually does. It's what happens. And it's what you usually expect in a good story, in a good novel, in a good movie. The characters have an arc and they go through character development. And I see how they're trying to do that throughout the show. But just Moffat can't write it. Moffat can't write that well. Because he tries to be, like I said, smarter than the source material, and it's just adding on stuff that doesn't work for the original characters, where it becomes absolutely ridiculous. Like at the end of series 4, we have so many huge ridiculous things going on with like plot reveals there, secret family members there. It is absolutely ridiculous where Moffat tries to be so blimmin' smart that it's just unbelievable and wouldn't work with anything that we know from the original canon. Which is why BBC Sherlock starts out great, I think, and then slowly but steadily becomes worse and worse as the show goes on, because it exceeds the ideas of the original premise from the canon. So this is it for this video. All my points about how BBC Sherlock honors and also disrespects the canon. Like I said, it's a great show. It does a lot of things right, and I love watching it, but also there's a lot of things very wrong in a way where I'm like, why the hell did you do it like this, Moffat? Why? Also, my guess is why. So that's it for my list. Do tell me down in the comments below what some of your favorite bits or least favorite bits in BBC Sherlock are. As you know, I always like to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't done it already. And I'll see all of you next time. Goodbye.